This is Harsha, your instructor. So coming to my experience, I would like to quickly introduce myself. I can tell my experience, what exactly I have dealt with. So I do have around 14 years of experience in DevOps process and enterprise level cloud hosting as well. I mostly worked on AWS and Azure clouds and partially have some knowledge on GCP as well. So coming to my technologies, like I have worked on some of the languages as well. Like I am a Java developer initially, and I converted it to the DevOps. And also I worked on some of the automation tools like Docker and Kubernetes and some virtualization tools. And also I have strong experience in WebLogic, which is a middleware administration tool. And apart from that, I am good at CI/CD, which is the basic life of our DevOps process. Like, so whenever you want to perform some DevOps process, the first thing which comes to your mind is basically the CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous deployment, which is basically used to automate the flow of the deployment. For that, we will be hosting all these tools. I have extensive experience working on all these tools. And also, apart from that, I do have some knowledge on scripting tools like Bash and Python as well. This is my overall experience. And coming to our course, it is basically like DevOps plus AWS. Okay. So before that, I just want to hear from yourself. Is there anyone from non-IT background from your side? So at least like if you are not working, so most of you people might have known what exactly the name cloud is all about, what is Java, is a programming language is all about, and all these things, right? So do anyone doesn't know the basic stuff? Like I'm not seeing the screen. If you ping me, I cannot see. Like you can speak out. Yeah, Jay, you can say like what exactly your experience is all about. Like you raised your hand.
Okay, so like support operations in Amazon, like it's completely non-IT.
Okay, at least you know the basic process, right? Like what exactly is software is all about, what exactly Java is all about, what is a DevOps. At least like you may not know the exact definition of a DevOps, but before joining this course, you might have at least gone into some basic understanding like what exactly DevOps is all about, right?
Yes, yes.
So yeah, I want to know some other people who is exactly from non-IT background, like who doesn't know anything technical and all these things, like who doesn't know how the software works. Is there anyone who joined like that?
Yeah,
Oh,
hi, this is Karthik.
yeah, Karthik, tell me.
Yeah, I'm from non-IT background.
Okay, like you're not from non-IT background, right? Fine.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah, I just want to know, like just like on a high level, why exactly you want to choose DevOps? Like
Because
you are
there
from
is,
non-IT background.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have interest in coding. That's why.
Okay, you are saying like you don't have much interest in the coding. That's why you think DevOps is a process where there will be minimal coding. I won't say it won't be zero coding for sure. If you join in any of the process of our software development, definitely we need to write at least few lines of the code to automate. Okay. So when we talk about DevOps, it's all about minimalistic coding. Yeah, absolutely correct. Okay, fine, Karthik. Like we can start from fresh from your side. That's fine. So anyone from IT background or whoever knows what exactly is a DevOps from your side? What do you feel about DevOps? And why do you want to learn DevOps? Can anyone speak out? So I want it to be interactive, like otherwise it will be like another engineering class for you. Otherwise it will be so boring and
this is Jay Chandra.
Yeah,
as of my concern and my knowledge, DevOps is a combination of multiple tools which is integrated as per the part of product requirement of the project requirement and customer what I mean to say, customer requirements, like he needs some of the tools which needs to be integrated as a part of the process. So nothing but DevOps is not a single DevOps is not a single software or tool that can be used. It is a combination of multiple tools that can be integrated as a part of product requirement, and that can be used in a successful pattern.
Okay. So like you said, like it's not a single tool, it's a combination of multiple tools to achieve some deployment process or to build some application. That is what you want to say. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is also a perfect definition. Anyone want to try what exactly is a DevOps other than this? It's not a single tool. Someone has said that is absolutely true. Other people? You join DevOps and you don't know anything about DevOps, means that is so bad, right? Like at least you need to know. Like, anyone want to try? At least a lame definition is also fine. Fine. If you are not interested in speaking up, that is also absolutely fine. I will give you a basic definition. Most of the people will think it's a combination of dev plus operations, as it says dev plus operations. Like, can someone be on mute? Like, your voice. Okay, echoing. Okay, fine. So when we call about DevOps, like people say, mostly it's like dev plus operation combination. So it is partially true, but not exactly. It's like we need to work on dev part and also operation part. So nobody will be working on both dev and operations for sure. If you work on both the things, you are like a full software company working together. Like there will be multiple roles in a software. It's not like dev and operations can be done by a single tool, right? So development has a dedicated person. These operations has a dedicated person. But why this DevOps came into the picture? I want to say because of agile methodology. Have you heard about agile? What is agile? Anyone know? So it's one of a project management approach. So basically, whenever a requirement comes to you, so like what are the different phases you want to build that requirement? What is the different collaboration phases to build it, to improve the software, to design it, and to deploy in the production? All these phases will be basically dealt with the agile process. Okay, so that is like a simple project management approach we generally call. What is the agile methodology is basically. Ignore the spellings. Management approach. Okay. So similarly, in olden days, people used to follow waterfall model. So it is older version of agile model. So both the models want to perform project management only, like how the project will be developed, what are the different phases to develop a project, what is it continuous integration is all about, how we deploy all these applications. Both will be basically dealing it. But in olden days, people used to follow waterfall model, but nowadays agile methodology is basically used in the picture. Why? Many of you might have heard about waterfall model. Is it yes or no? Like, have you heard about this name at least in your BTech? At least yes or no? No? Okay. At least most of you people might have heard about this. What exactly is a waterfall model? But we may not have concentrated on this. That is absolutely fine. But so when we want to develop a software, so there will be software development lifecycle that we generally follow. SDLC phases, software development lifecycle phases. So when we want to develop any of the software in an industry, the first thing what comes to the picture is something like when your manager will be talking about this software development lifecycle. So there are around 5 to 6 phases that we need to understand in this SDLC. What is the first one? We need to plan. Okay. The next one is something like requirement analysis. Next one is something like design. Once we design, we will be implement. Perform the testing. Whatever we have implemented, we will be performing the testing. Finally, we will be deploying it. So these are like few of the phases. If you want to develop any of the software, these are like 5 to 6 phases generally any of the software follows. Okay. So in olden days, people used to do all these things in a sequential order. Like initially, if they want to develop a simple e-commerce application, like an Amazon or a Flipkart, or we already know what exactly is the e-commerce application, right? So if they want to develop an e-commerce application, what exactly they used to do? they used to completely plan it. Like, what are all the different things we need to build for that? What is the servers that we need to use? How much configuration we need to use? What type of language we need to use for front end, back end, database? All these things they used to plan. Next, they used to get the requirement from the customer. Suppose if you are building an e-commerce application for the customer Flipkart or some Amazon, think like these are like our customers. We used to get all the requirements, like how the payment should work, how the requirement should flow, means how the product should be added to the cart. All this requirement analysis should be taken care. Like post sales, like what are the supports you want to give, upon returns, what exactly the actions you want to take. All these things are basically taken care in the requirement analysis. Then designing. So in this designing, we will be mostly working on database, tables, schemas, relations in between the tables. All these things are basically designed. And what is the front end, what exactly back end, where exactly we want to deploy, all these things will be done in the design part. So all these phases used to take around 4 to 5 months to just start a project. So waterfall model used to be taking a long time to perform a simple deployment of a sample application also. Suppose if you want to perform a simple deployment, like I want to have a login page. So every time I used to plan, take 10 days or 5 days, get the requirement analysis, get the design implementation, design and perform the implementation, perform the testing, finally deploy into the production. So it is like a tiresome task because every phase is basically done in a sequential order. That is what waterfall model is all about. But now with the advent of agile methodology, all these phases are basically done in a sequential order. Okay. So how can we do it in a sequential order? Can we get all the requirements and start it once? Like without getting the requirements, we cannot start it, right? So that's why we came up with a new solution like microservices. Have you heard about microservices? Any of you person? What exactly is a microservice? No? At least if you know.
We
Yeah.
can call it as like retail services.
Retail service is like one of the example of a microservice we can say, like, but all the retail services are not not a microservices. If you talk about microservice on a simple terms, it is the smallest piece of code or a service that can be testable independently.
Okay.
Simple definition. Okay. So suppose if you take an e-commerce application, what is the smallest piece of thing that can be testable independently? If you talk about payments, okay, payments as a service can fit into e-commerce application, a finance application, a banking application. For everything, payments will work, right?
Yes, agreed.
All these things are basically considered as one microservice. Similarly, login, logout functionality, UI functionality, check-in, check-out functionality, everything is basically considered as an individual microservice. Okay. So individual microservices are basically developed parallelly. So the plan is basically done to develop only that microservice. So if you know the payments functionality, we can simply start the functionality of payments. No need to wait for other integrations like login, logout, or check-in, check-out functionality, or returns functionality, or whatever it is. That's why what happened with the advent of agile methodology and microservices, these deployment of smaller microservices are just taking weeks to couple of weeks. Like maybe we call it a sprint. Like minimum sprint is around 2 weeks. Okay. So we generally deploy this application and we perform all these actions in a sequential order. There will be multiple development teams that will be taking care of all these actions. It's not like only single development team will be taking care of all the microservices. So if there are multiple microservices, all these microservices are developed individual by different development teams. Okay. Now it is fine. Okay. But in olden days, what you used to do, they used to get all the requirements. There is no microservices. They need to develop everything at once and deploy everything at once. Okay. Who develop all the initial phases? Who do all the initial phases? The first 5 phases like plan, requirement analysis, design, and implementation is basically a developer task. And deployment is basically like an operation task. Testing, we can also talk it as QA task, but automation testing is still an integration with an operation task using CI/CD process. leave it like still. So implementation, design, requirement gathering, all these things are basically taken by developer, and deployment is basically taken care by operation guy. But where the DevOps is here, there is a developer, there is an operation people, but where the DevOps came into the picture. So there comes a new requirement when we are following the microservices architecture. What happens when we follow the microservices architecture? Multiple teams evolve, multiple development people come into the picture. Suppose microservice 1 has its own plan phase, deploy phase. Microservice 2 has its own plan phase and deploy phase. And microservice 3 has its own plan phase and deploy phase. So it is so difficult to keep track of what are all the changes that developers are making by a single operation team. Okay. Here, the operation guy cannot track simply everything together of all the microservices. That's why there came a new team which closely collaborate with all the dev changes that we are making and try to automate the stuff for the operation people to deploy that application. There comes a new team like DevOps, which basically talks with all the dev people who are working on multiple microservices and perform all, like get the requirement of what are all the changes he's making. Suppose if he wants to automate some stuff, if he wants to create some server, if he wants to create some database or some queuing mechanism. So this DevOps will be collaborating with the dev people and getting all these requirements and automate how to create all this process and give it to the operation team who perform the deployment. That's why a new team like DevOps came into the picture. Okay. It's basically, that's why we basically call it as dev plus operations. But with dev, we basically collaborate with them. With the operation team also, we won't perform the deployment. We will automate for the operation. For dev, we will be performing collaboration. Okay. Is it clear like what exactly the DevOps is all about? Or any questions on it?
Yes, it's clear for me.
Yeah. So that's why so DevOps as a team has been evolved from last few years only. Like if you talk about last 7-8 years, it has been evolved so much. Before that also, we used to learn all the tools that you have mentioned here. Like it's not a single software. As you said, it's not a single software. We will be using all the software from day one onwards, like when the software development has evolved. But DevOps came into the picture from last 7 to 8 years, because it's mostly because of this agile methodology and microservices together. So multiple teams are developing. In order to collaborate with multiple teams, the DevOps came into the picture. Okay. So that is how the DevOps has been evolved. Okay. Now, talking about AWS, what exactly is an AWS? Any idea? Guys, you should be knowing what exactly is AWS. This is
It's an Amazon Web Services, basically on cloud computing.
yeah, that's a good definition. One thing you said is something like cloud computing. You said the full form Amazon Web Services. Okay, what is web service? Okay, before going into the web service, what is cloud computing? Definitely, everyone might have heard about this cloud computing in their BTech or whatever the degree you have done it. So what exactly is in the cloud?
Services provided in the cloud, like infrastructure as a cloud service and platform as a service and software as a service.
Okay, services provided in the cloud is cloud computing, you're saying. Without cloud, can't we get the services? At least yes or no? Can we get it or not?
Yes, we can get it.
Yeah. Then what exactly is the difference? Simple definition. By definition.
Redundancy,
Go
I
ahead.
can say like,
Yeah, tell me.
redundancy of the services.
What do you mean by redundancy? Like,
means
just
like
give an example.
yeah, just means like earlier we used to take the infrastructure as a fixed mode. After coming this web services, we are using it on as per the requirement, and the cost is also as per the requirement.
Okay, like you're saying,
Like
cost.
elasticity, you can mention it as.
Based on your requirement, you are absolutely using these services. If it is
Yes.
not required, we are not using it. That's a
Yes,
pretty
yes.
definition of cloud
Yes.
computing. So in a simple words, if you say on-demand availability of any computing resources is known as cloud computing. On-demand.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
That's a textbook definition to say, but what we will elaborate. System resources. So you can ask me a question. Why before cloud can't we get these services on demand? We can get it. So we can host an on-premise server and we can build your own cluster of services or cluster of virtual machines on top of the server which we host. We need to install an operating system in that virtual machine. And we used to manage all this virtual machine. Whenever someone requires a virtual machine with some requirements of this CPU or 2-core CPU or 5 GB RAM. So there is a manual effort which requires the installation of all the softwares. It used to take a lot of time. But with the advent of cloud computing, what happens? All the system resources, what I have mentioned. What are the system resources? Like the RAM, CPU, or any physical storages, or network. All these things are basically given as on-demand service for us. Whenever there is a demand for us, we get those system resources with a simple click. That's why we call this cloud computing as on-demand availability of system resources. Before cloud computing, people used to follow on-premise hosting of their servers. And someone mute yourself, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Before hosting, people used to follow on-premise servers, like where they completely buy one server for their own company and try to establish a network, try to install some softwares which creates a virtual machine. All these things are so difficult to handle. But when we go with the cloud computing, it would be so simple for us. So we will be going there, registering for an account. We will be clicking a couple of options and we will be saying, like, I want a virtual machine with this much configuration. Within a 2 minutes, we will be getting this configuration. Okay. But even with cloud computing, we have disadvantages. Definitely, there is a lot of disadvantages on-premise. What is the first thing? What is the disadvantage that you feel with on-premise compared to cloud computing? Any idea, like why people move to cloud computing from on-prem? Maintenance cost. And any other things? Availability. Why I'm saying availability is because, like, if power goes down in a specific city for a couple of hours, complete power grid failure happened. So then your on-premise server won't be reachable and your application will be down for that specific 2 hours or whatever time frame is all about. That's why people don't prefer on-premise. Nowadays, people are going to cloud computing so that they trust the cloud providers like AWS, Azure, or GCP, or whomsoever, and say that is, and they are expecting it is most probably available 99.99%. They will also won't say 100% available for us, but they will say 99.9 or 99% available for us based on the service that they provide. Okay. So that is why people go with the cloud computing concept. But why we need to learn only AWS? There is Azure and GCP, right? Why we are learning only AWS? Any idea?
It's a huge market.
Exactly. I thought you will say I know only AWS. Like, it's not like I know only AWS, but generally I'm just kidding. Like, so if you see the market, like if you take 100% of the market, so till 8 years before or 7 years before, like AWS is the major share, like around, it used to have around 70 to 75%. Now it has been reduced significantly with the advent of Azure and GCP to 60%. But still, you have, if you get into a DevOps with a cloud, you will have a chance of getting a job in AWS up to 60%. That means most of the people will be using AWS in their hosting of their application. That's why people try to learn AWS first, which is the basics of all the software or basics of all the cloud computing providers that we have, and understand what are all the services it provides. And the same set of services will be provided by the other clouds as well. If you talk about GCP, if you talk about Azure, it will provide the same set of things, but with a different naming terminology. That's it. There is nothing difference in between them. But first, we need to understand some concept of one of the cloud computing. That is why we are going to learn AWS as this process. So one more question I will ask you, as you are not asking me any question. So when you have got a job as a DevOps engineer, will you end up working only in cloud? Or can you get job in any other things as well, like on-premise as well?
We have to learn tools.
Exactly. It's
Kubernetes.
not like right now we are learning DevOps plus AWS. It's not like we will be ending a job in AWS itself or Azure itself or whatever the cloud itself. At the end of the day, being a DevOps engineer, we should be versatile to learn any of the tool that may come into that is required for the end client. Okay, but for that we need to understand the basic tools. What are the different tools that are available to establish the desired goal? That is what we are trying to do it right now. Okay, it's not like being a DevOps, we will be getting only the project inside the cloud. You may end up having project in on-premise servers also. But you need to understand the basic networking concept, basic virtual machine concept, how it works, how to deploy an application. All these things are our requirements as a DevOps. Okay. So till now, any questions from your side?
No, Harsha, nothing from mine.
Okay. So these are like few things I want to give a clarity to you people. That's why like I just want to give like what exactly is cloud computing and what exactly is AWS, why we are learning AWS, what is the DevOps and such. Okay. So coming to our course, we basically learn AWS for sure, as I have mentioned already. Coming to the DevOps, what are the different things we will be learning is something like, so we will be starting with Linux basics. So what exactly is Linux basics is something like we will be learning about all the commands that we use on day-to-day basis as a DevOps engineer. Then we will be learning shell scripting as well. Okay. So in order to automate the things, like we need to at least know one of the scripting language, whether it is Python or shell. Okay, that's why most of the people prefer shell as their scripting language. That's why at least we need to know the basics. That's why I'm teaching you shell scripting. This will be going for initial 1 week as such. Once we are done with the basics, we will be starting with actual DevOps tools. That is nothing but CI/CD process. So in the CI/CD process, we will be learning about Jenkins, starting from the admin part, user management, pipelines. Like you understood what exactly the pipeline is all about, right? Like when we want to perform continuous integration and continuous deployment, all these things needs to be done in a sequential order. So initially we need to, like some developer will write a code, we need to pull the code, perform some testing, deploy it, build the application, deploy that application in lower environments, test it, again deploy it. All these phases which you have mentioned has to be done in a sequential order. So that is basically the pipeline. Okay, we will be learning all these concepts as part of the CI/CD. For that, we will be learning about the tool Jenkins. Once we are done with the CI/CD, we will be starting with AWS. In AWS, we will be starting with identity and access management, where the users, groups, roles, and all these things come into the picture. And networking part, VPCs, subnets, and all these things. And EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud. Okay. In this, we will be talking about virtual machine, storage, block storage, and also auto scaling, load balancing. I'm not writing all the terminologies over here, but I'm just talking most of the things. And all these things will be covered under EC2. Finally, we'll be talking about S3. These are like 4 major services that we'll be covering as part of AWS. And next, we will go to containerization mechanism. Okay. In containerization mechanism, we'll be mostly talking about Docker and Kubernetes. Okay. In this Kubernetes, what we mostly talk about is something like we'll be talking about Elastic Kubernetes service. It's a service in AWS. We will be building our own Elastic Kubernetes service, try to deploy a sample application inside the Kubernetes. In order to deploy something in the Kubernetes, we need to understand Docker. Okay. This is the basic step for building a Docker image. This comes under containerization. So the next tool we will be learning is configuration management system. Configuration management systems. So what exactly is a configuration management? Suppose if you have hundreds of missions, if you want to install same set of software on all the hundreds of missions, we cannot do it manually every time, right? For that, there are some tools like Ansible, Chef, Puppet, and all these things. So the most commonly used one is something like Ansible. So we'll be learning about the tool Ansible for the configuration management. Finally, we'll be learning some monitoring tools. So these are like few of the things which we'll be learning. At the end, there will be a sample project where we'll be integrating all these tools that we have learned. This is about the overall thing that we'll be learning as part of the DevOps plus AWS classes. Okay. Anything that you feel that I am missing over here? One thing I haven't mentioned here is something like infrastructure as a code tool. Suppose if you want to build an IAM user group or role or a EC2 instance, we will be not going into the dashboard and creating them manually as a DevOps engineer. We need to write some code, infrastructure as a code tool to basically create them. So for that, we will be learning about Terraform. Okay. Code in the sense like it's not like Java or Python. It will not be that difficult. It's like a declarative syntax. We just need to define some variables and all these things and just write the code. There is a predefined section that is given by Terraform. We just need to reuse it. So these are like few of the things which we'll be learning. So one thing which I'm mentioning over here is something like after end of each and every topic. Suppose if we have completed Linux, and it took around 4 days to complete all the Linux command, the 5th day will be your lab session. Again, after the lab session, we will be discussing about what exactly the things that you are lagging the next day, and we will start with the new topic, shell scripting. Suppose we have completed shell scripting after 4 days, the 5th day will be your lab session again. I will be giving you some tasks to complete, and I expect you to come back with the solution. At least if you haven't done also, like we will discuss like where exactly you are lagging out there. Okay, similarly, it goes with every topic. Okay, and weekdays are only our classes. We don't have classes on weekends. It's up to you to prepare on weekends. It's up to you. I don't bother you on weekends because we have a dedicated lab session at the end of each and every topic. There also you can learn. So one more add-on that we have is something like once we complete our course, we will be giving a AWS Cloud Practitioner voucher for you as well. You can write that certification on your behalf.